December 17, 1944, 5:30 hours, Belgium. The tank's engine coughed, sputtered, then died. SS Peiper slammed his fist against the turret hatch, the metallic clang echoing through the pre-dawn darkness. His driver attempted to restart the 700 horsepower engine. Nothing. The fuel gauge read empty. Hare called up from his compartment, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. The reserve tank is also dry. Peiper climbed down from his command tank, his boots crunching on the frozen Belgian soil. Around him, the most powerful armored spearhead that had assembled for Operation Watch on this offensive sat motionless. 67 tanks, 149 and nearly 5,000 of Germany's most elite SS soldiers, all paralyzed by empty fuel tanks. Through the morning mist, Peiper could see the abandoned American position. Ahead, a critical supply depot for the U.S. 99th Infantry Division. Americans had fled so quickly they'd left fires still burning in oil drums, coffee still hot in metal cups, and there, lined up like a gift from the god of war himself, stood rows upon rows of cans, thousands of them, the distinctive olive-drab American fuel containers. Peiper approached slowly, almost reverently, his hands open one can and sniffed benzene hair. High-octane gasoline. As his men began the frantic work of refueling their vehicles, Peiper walked among the stockpile, counting. The mathematics were staggering. 50,000 gallons, enough to fuel his entire Kampfgruppe for the push to the Meuse River. Enough to potentially change the course of the offensive. The Americans had abandoned more fuel in this single depot than most German divisions had received in the past 6 months, but as Peiper stood among this bounty, watching his men pour American fuel into German tanks, a crushing realization settled over him like the morning fog. If the Americans could afford to abandon such quantities, if they could leave behind what Germany would guard with entire divisions, then this war was already over. Germany hadn't just miscalculated. Germany had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of its enemy. 6 months before Peiper's discovery in June 1944, Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments and War Production, had presented with a report that should have ended all offensive operations immediately. Germany's synthetic fuel production, the lifeblood of had been systematically destroyed by Allied bombing. The works, which had produced 175,000 tons of fuel in April, managed only 5,000 tons by September. The hydrogenation plants at Brooks were operating at less than 10% capacity. The numbers told a story of inevitable defeat. In 1944, the United States produced 1.8 billion barrels of crude oil. Germany, including all synthetic production and captured Romanian fields, managed 33 million barrels, less than 2% of American production. The Third Reich was attempting to wage mechanized warfare with logistics, while America was drowning its armies in petroleum abundance. Major of this logistics command had calculated that this offensive would require 4.5 million gallons of fuel to reach, allocated 5 million gallons, but only half was actually delivered due to transportation problems. The German High Command was betting the entire offensive on capturing enemy supplies, a strategy that revealed terminal weakness rather than strength. The Americans, meanwhile, had constructed a petroleum pipeline system across France called PLU, Pipeline Under the Ocean, and the Red Ball Express, a massive truck convoy system that delivered 12,500 tons of supplies daily to the front lines. By December 1944, American forces in Europe were consuming 1.2 million gallons of fuel per day and receiving 1.4 million gallons. They were accumulating reserves while fighting. Peiper was not a fool. At 29, he was one of the youngest regimental commanders in the SS, holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, veteran of the Eastern Front, where he had learned that in modern warfare, fuel was more precious than ammunition. His Kampfgruppe had been designated the decisive point of the entire offensive. On December 14, 2 days before the offensive, Peiper attended the final briefing at General commanding the 6th SS Army was blunt. You will have enough fuel to reach the Meuse if you capture American supplies. The fuel allocation for Kampfgruppe Peiper was 31,000 gallons, enough for 50 mi of combat operations. The distance to the Meuse was 65 mi. The mathematics of failure were built into the plan from the beginning. As his column prepared to advance on December 16, Peiper issued strict orders. Tanks would operate in single file to conserve fuel. Engines would be shut off during any halt longer than 5 minutes, and the capture of American fuel dumps was priority one. Above even tactical objectives, the contrast with American operations could not have been starker. That same morning, Captain James Rose of the U.S. 743rd Tank Battalion, stationed just 20 miles from Peiper's starting position, recorded in his unit diary, received fuel resupply 8,000 g 3rd delivery. This week storage tanks already at capacity, December 16, 1944. 5:30 hours, the German artillery barrage that opened Operation Watch on the used more ammunition in 2 hours than they had allocated for entire operations earlier in the war, but even this impressive display masked critical shortages. Peiper's column began moving. At 7:00 a.m., already behind schedule, the roads which on German maps appeared as highways were narrow country lanes, many unpaved. Within hours, traffic jams developed as vehicles designed for the Russian steppes struggled through the forest. At Peiper's first objective, they encountered unexpected resistance from a single American intelligence and reconnaissance platoon, 18 men who held up the most powerful German armored column for nearly 10 hours. During the delay, Peiper's vehicles sat idling, burning precious fuel, when they finally broke through and reached at dawn on December 17. Peiper's column had covered 20 miles and consumed 40% of their fuel. At this rate, they would run dry before reaching the halfway point to the MOS, the American supply depot. It was not even a primary facility. It was a forward supply point for the 99th Infantry Division, what the U.S. Army classified as a Class 3B depot, a temporary fuel station, yet what Peiper found there exceeded the monthly fuel allocation for an entire German division. Helm hands later, we found pyramids of cans, each containing 5 gall of gasoline. They were stacked 3 m high, extending for perhaps 200 m. The Americans had not even attempted to destroy them. The captured fuel was high-octane aviation gasoline mixed with motor fuel 80 octane or higher. German vehicles, especially the temperamental engines in the Tiger tanks, were designed for 74-octane fuel. American gasoline was actually too good, causing engine problems in several German vehicles. As Peiper's refueled, they made more discoveries. Sergeant found shipping manifests in the depot office. He could read English, having worked in his father's import business before the war. The papers indicated this fuel had been shipped from Texas to New York, across the Atlantic to Liverpool, across the Channel to Normandy, and trucked 400 m. The journey of over 6,000 mi had taken less than 6 weeks. I showed the papers to Peiper, recalled in a 1976 interview. He read them twice, then crumpled them up. He said nothing, but his face went pale. We both understood what this meant. Private Ernst found a stack of Stars and Stripes newspapers dated December 15, just 2 days old. Headlines celebrated the opening of a new fuel pipeline from to Verdun, capable of delivering 300,000 gallons per day, a single pipeline delivering more fuel daily than Kampfgruppe Peiper would use in the entire offensive. To comprehend the shock of Peiper's discovery, one must understand Germany's fuel situation by late 1944. Since May, Allied bombing had reduced synthetic fuel production by 90%. Was grounding aircraft for lack of aviation fuel. Pilot training had been cut from 250 flight hours to 60 hours. The German Navy's surface fleet had effectively ceased operations, were fitted with snorkels to conserve diesel by running on batteries longer. On the home front, German civilians had not seen private automobile traffic since 1942. Gasoline was so precious that the Gestapo investigated black market theft of individual liters. Farmers were returning to plows. Meanwhile, the United States was producing 67% of the world's oil. East Texas oil field alone produced more petroleum than all of German-occupied Europe. American refineries were operating at such capacity that Standard Oil was experimenting with new petroleum byproducts simply because they had excess crude. With the 50,000 gallons captured at Peiper's column surged forward, they reached by noon on December 17, capturing additional supplies, rations, ammunition, and most importantly, maps showing other American fuel depots in the area. But the maps revealed a disturbing truth. The Americans had fuel stockpiles everywhere. Every major crossroads had a depot. The U.S. First Army alone had 3.5 million gallons in reserve. Peiper pushed on to where his forces would commit the massacre, killing 84 American prisoners. Even this war crime was connected to fuel desperation. Peiper later claimed he could not spare gasoline to transport prisoners. By evening on December 17, Peiper's spearhead reached site. Major American fuel depot containing over 2 million gallons. Here was enough fuel to guarantee reaching the Meuse, but as the first German vehicles approached, American engineers were already at work. Captain John Brewster of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion had received warning of the German approach. His orders were simple: deny fuel to the enemy at all costs. The contained 2,189,000 gallons of gasoline in cans stacked across 15 acres at 16:30 on December 17th. As Peiper's advance guard approached, Captain Brewster gave the order. Engineers poured gasoline trails. Between the stacks, white phosphorus grenades were distributed. Technical Sergeant threw the first grenade. The explosion was immediate and tremendous, he recalled. A wall of fire shot up maybe 100. Within minutes, the entire depot was an inferno. Peiper's lead tanks arrived to find a pillar of black smoke rising 1,000 into the sky. The fire would burn for 3 days, consuming enough fuel to have powered Peiper's entire division to Antwerp and back. Described the scene. "The stood on his tank turret watching the flames," he said. "Nothing for perhaps 5 minutes. Then he climbed down and told me they can afford to burn 2 million gallons to deny them. To us, what are we doing here?" Across the American engineers were destroying fuel dumps rather than risk capture. At 1.1 million gallons burned at Spar, 2.5 million gallons were destroyed. In total, Americans deliberately destroyed over 8 million gallons during the first week, more than Germany had allocated for the entire operation. The ability to casually destroy millions of gallons was rooted in a supply system beyond German comprehension. The Red Ball Express had delivered 412,000 tons of supplies using 6,000 trucks operating round the clock. Each truck consumed 40 gal daily. The operation itself burned more fuel than German Army Group B received monthly. By December 1944, the motor transport service employed 230 truck companies operating on color-coded routes. System delivered 20,000 tons of supplies daily, including 3,000 tons of fuel. Colonel James, Chief Logistics Officer for 1st Army, recorded on December 18, "Fuel receipts yesterday: 1,847,000 gallons. Fuel issued 1,623,000 gal. Net gain to reserves 224,000 gal." The pipeline system was even more impressive. Operation Pluto had laid pipes across the English Channel, pumping 1 million gallons daily from Britain. A network of pipelines extended inland. The Paris line delivered 800,000 gallons daily. The Seine line moved 650,000 gal. By December 1944, Allied forces Northwest Europe were consuming 7.5 million gallons daily while receiving 8.22 million gallons. They were building reserves during offensive operations. As Peiper pushed deeper into Belgium on December 18, the impossibility of the German position became clear. They captured another depot. 5,000 gallons consumed in 3 hours of combat. Tiger tanks consumed 2.5 gal per mile in battle. Panthers burned 1.5 gal per mile. In the difficult terrain, consumption increased by 40%. Helped Otto, maintenance officer for the 1st SS Regiment, recorded, "By noon on December 18, we had consumed 67,000 gallons since the offensive began. We had captured perhaps 55,000 gallons. We were operating at a deficit." The Americans monitoring German radio traffic through Ultra intercepts knew Peiper's fuel situation. General Courtney ordered all units, enemy critically short of fuel, destroy all gasoline stocks threatened by capture. That same day, American C-47s flew 316 sorties delivering supplies to, including 160,000 gal of fuel. Americans were flying more fuel to a surrounded garrison than Peiper's entire Kampfgruppe possessed. By December 19, as Peiper's forces engaged defenders at the fuel crisis had become critical. Tanks were being abandoned with empty fuel tanks rather than from battle damage. Peiper consolidated his remaining fuel, perhaps 8,000 gallons, enough for one engagement or retreat, but not both. Meanwhile, Allied planners were preparing for January operations. Brigadier General requested 245 million gallons for the coming month. The request was approved without discussion. The contrast extended beyond quantity. American vehicles were standardized for Efficiency, Sherman tanks consumed 0.8 gall per mile versus the Tiger's 2.5. American trucks got 8 per gallon fully loaded, parts were interchangeable. Maintenance, German forces operated a bewildering array of captured and manufactured vehicles with different requirements. French tanks needed different oil than German Panthers. Soviet trucks required different parts than German Opels, each complication. Logistical difficulties. On December 20th, Peiper received a radio message: fuel convoy destroyed by Allied aircraft, no resupply possible, continue. With available resources, Peiper called his commanders together. Was blunt: we have fuel for perhaps 20, the Muse is 30 away, according to his testimony. The said, we have discovered we are fighting an enemy who burns more fuel to deny it to us than we received for this entire operation. What we captured at which seemed miraculous was nothing to them. We cannot win. This realization was spreading. General commanding 5th Army later wrote, when I learned Americans had destroyed 8 million gallons rather than risk our capturing it, I knew the offensive had failed. Before it began, Colonel captured December 23rd told interrogators, your soldiers throw away chocolate. My men haven't seen chocolate in 2 years. You burn millions of gallons. We measure by the liter. How can we fight such abundance? By December 21st, Peiper was surrounded at his tanks immobile. American forces surrounding him. 31st Infantry Division, 82nd Airborne 3rd Armored had a combined fuel allocation of 340,000 gallons for December 21st alone. Peiper had perhaps 1,000 gallons. Private First Class Richard wrote home, we've got Germans surrounded who ran out of gas. Our captain jokes we use more fuel heating coffee than they have for tanks. The American response demonstrated industrial warfare at its peak. 3rd Army pivot north required 350,000 gallons just for redeployment, considered impossible by German standards yet accomplished in 3 days. December 23rd brought clear weather. Allied aircraft flew 2,000 sorties, each burning fuel at rates that would have grounded the for weeks. P-47s consumed 300 gall per hour. B-26s burned 200 gall hourly. 1 day's air operations consumed more than Germany's entire offensive allocation. On the night of December 23rd to 24th, Peiper abandoned his vehicles and escaped on foot. Of 119 tanks and assault guns that began the offensive, 39 remained operational but immobilized. These were destroyed with remaining ammunition. Described the scene, we drained the last fuel from all vehicles, maybe 200 gall total. The personally destroyed his command tank, millions of equipment destroyed by empty fuel tanks. Of 5,000 men who began with Kampfgruppe Peiper, approximately 770 returned. They had advanced 60 mi, captured several depots, and discovered the truth about Allied logistics. News of Peiper's discoveries spread rapidly through German command. On December 26th, Field Marshal Walter Model received reports on captured American supplies. His chief of staff recorded Model's reaction. The Field Marshal read the quantities twice. 50,000 gallons at 2 million burned at 8 million destroyed. Rather than captured, he said, we are not fighting the same war. Informed December 28th refused to accept reality. Speer wrote, insisted the numbers were propaganda. When shown photographs of burning, he claimed it was Hollywood effects, but lower ranks understood. Wrote his wife, Americans destroy more fuel daily than we receive monthly. They drive tanks like we march. This war is lost. The fuel crisis was symptomatic of a larger truth. By 1944, America produced 50% of world manufacturing, a new aircraft every 5 minutes, a ship daily, a tank every 7 minutes. Petroleum production statistics were overwhelming. United States 1.8 billion barrels, Soviet Union 110 million barrels, Germany, including synthetic, 33 million barrels, Japan 2.6 million barrels. The Axis combined produced less than 2% of American petroleum. Every major German offensive after 1942 had constrained by fuel. Every American offensive was supported by abundance German planners couldn't conceive. Lieutenant Colonel Chester recorded a revealing incident December 27th. A logistics officer reported weather had reduced fuel deliveries to only 500,000 gallons daily. There was concern until someone noted this exceeded Germany's total offensive allocation. German PWs from the were more shocked by American waste than firepower, seeing GIS discard rations or Use gasoline for heating shattered morale more than artillery, Austgat told interrogators. We knew your production numbers abstractly, but seeing soldiers waste more than we possessed made them real. Every German who saw your casual abundance knew the war was hopeless. This knowledge spread through letters despite censorship. Ernst wrote, Americans wash clothes. Gasoline, they feed chocolate to dogs, they fire artillery for Christmas, we cannot fight infinity. The psychological impact undermined German racial superiority narratives. How could decadent Americans possess such wealth? While the master race scraped for necessities, during Nuremberg trials German leaders consistently cited logistics, particularly fuel, as decisive. Field Marshal, we had operational superiority 1940–41. By 1944, we couldn't move forces for lack of fuel, while Americans moved armies like chess pieces. Peiper, tried for the massacre, offered revealing testimony. Every decision after December 17th was influenced by fuel shortage. We couldn't maneuver, pursue, or retreat effectively. Americans moved freely while we counted leaders, General Hinz wrote when Peiper captured 50,000 gallons, meaning everything to him but nothing to Americans. The war was over. The story resonates because it represents when industrial warfare reached its conclusion. Wars were won by production statistics, not warrior courage. The romantic notion of warfare died in the among empty fuel tanks. Dr. Richard calculated that by 1944, Allied to Axis production ratios exceeded 5:1 in major categories. In petroleum, it approached 50:1. These advantages couldn't be overcome by superior training or tactics. America produced 324,750 aircraft during the war. Germany, 11,997. Americans built 88,410 tanks. Germany, 46,857. But most tellingly, America refined 1.8 billion barrels of oil in 1944 alone, while Germany scraped together 33 million barrels. December 24, 1944. As Peiper's men slipped through American lines on foot, abandoning 39 tanks, 70, and 177 other vehicles, the magnitude crystallized. They had captured 50,000 gallons, seemingly miraculous, only to learn it was meaningless to an enemy who could burn millions. Reflected in 1975. That morning at finding American fuel, we celebrated like winning the lottery. By evening, learning about burning, we understood we'd already lost. Americans had so much they could destroy what we'd die to possess. The 50,000 gallons was less than a single American armor division consumed in 2 days, less than the Red Ball Express burned in 3 hours. A rounding error in Allied daily consumption. Major General J. Collins later wrote, Germans' desperate attempts to capture fuel revealed their miscalculation. They assumed we valued fuel as they did, as irreplaceable. They couldn't comprehend we had so much we could burn millions rather than risk tactical disadvantage. Operation Watch on the failed through immutable mathematics of industrial warfare. The offensive consumed approximately 2.8 million gallons, 40% overall allocation, the difference from captured supplies. During the same period, Americans consumed 267 million gallons, nearly 100 times more. The lost 100,000 men, 800 tanks, 1,000 aircraft, but most devastating was loss of illusions. Every German witnessing American abundance understood Germany wasn't fighting a war but participating in its own execution. Peiper survived imprisoned until 1956 for war crimes. On July 14, 1976, he was murdered at his French home by unknown, but in 1967 he told historian Henry Lehman, finding that depot was the worst thing. If we'd run out earlier, we might have retreated with dignity. Instead, we discovered Americans had oceans while we had drops. We discovered impossibility. The lesson extends beyond World War II. In industrial warfare, logistics supersedes tactics, production overwhelms courage, abundance defeats dedication. The German soldier of 1944 was arguably better trained and more experienced. It didn't matter. Americans were backed by an industrial machine that could waste more than Germany could produce. This truth was encoded in every cannonet, every gallon burned at, every pipeline across France. Wars between industrial powers would be won by factories and refineries, not brilliant generals. Colonel calculated that in December 1944, each American soldier was supported by 67 of supplies daily. Each German received 3 pounds. Americans complained about waste. Germans would have considered American waste unimaginable abundance. In 1984, 40 years after the battle, veterans gathered at the museum displays. Peiper's Tiger tank still positioned where it ran out of fuel, December 23, 1944. Former Carl stood beside the tank with former staff. Sergeant Roy Anderson of the 30th Infantry Division. We always wondered why you stopped. Anderson said we thought it was tactical, laughed bitterly, we stopped. Because tanks were empty, you burned millions to keep it from us. How could we fight that? Anderson was quiet, then said, we never knew you were that short. We had so much we never thought about it. That exchange captured December 1944's truth. One side measured by the gallon, the other by millions. One fought for each can, the other burned oceans. The outcome was predetermined. German records provide damning evidence. Army Group B's War Diary, December 1944. December 16th, offensive begins, fuel 70% of minimum. December 17th, Peiper captures 50,000 gallons. December 18th, multiple depots destroyed, 5+ million gallons lost. December 19th, fuel critical units immobilized. December 24th, Peiper abandons vehicles, fuel exhaustion. Meanwhile, 1st Army reports December 16th, reserves 3.7 million gallons. December 17th, 2.2 million destroyed. December 18th, 1.8 million received. December 24th, reserves 4.1 million. Americans treated millions with indifference. Germans reserved for individual cans. Beyond quantity, American fuel represented technological superiority. American refineries perfected catalytic cracking, producing higher octanes more efficiently than German hydrogenation. American 100-octane aviation fuel gave aircraft performance advantages over German planes running 87-octane synthetic. Americans perfected additives Germany couldn't replicate. Ethylene detergents. German engines designed for lower quality often ran poorly on captured American gasoline. Fuel shortage shaped every soldier's experience. Hands recorded December 20th. March 30, no fuel for trucks past abandoned American vehicles with engine running for warmth. They leave engines running. We marched through snow. Medical services were crippled. Ambulances couldn't evacuate wounded. Hospitals couldn't run generators. Men died waiting for transportation that never came. Doctor. We had excellent surgeons, supplies captured from Americans, but no fuel for ambulances. Men died who could have been saved with 10 transport. The discoveries shattered German propaganda about American weakness. Soldiers had been told Americans were soft, incapable. Then they discovered Americans could destroy more than Germany possessed. Diary, December 28th. Reports indicate serious morale problems. Soldiers write about American superiority, undermining our narrative. But stories spread faster than censorship. The myth of German superiority couldn't survive contact with American logistics. This failure meant Germany had no options except desperate defense. General Jodl at Nuremberg. After we knew it was lost. We'd played our last card and discovered the enemy held all aces. Recognizing German desperation, Allies focused on destroying fuel production. By February 1945, German fuel production ceased. There was grounded training. They became static, destroyed by mobile enemies. Spring 1945 brought surreal scenes. German units surrendered from immobility, not defeat. Entire divisions sat helplessly as Allies drove past. General Major Fritz described, we had 42 operational tanks. Experienced crews, ammunition. We had 300 L fuel, not enough for the next town. We destroyed our tanks and walked to captivity. Meanwhile, American advance was constrained only by traffic jams from vehicle abundance. Third Army alone had 15,000 vehicles. Kampfgruppe Peiper's fuel crisis demonstrates how industrial capacity determined World War II's outcome when Peiper stood among captured. That December morning he glimpsed truth. They fought an enemy whose waste exceeded their need. The numbers tell everything. German offensive allocation 5 million gallons. Fuel destroyed by Americans 8 million gallons. Daily American consumption 7.5 million gall. Peiper's capture at 50,000 gall. Percentage. American daily supply 0.6%. The Battle of the Bulge killed 19,000 Americans, perhaps 100,000 Germans. It destroyed its last reserves, but its lasting impact was spreading knowledge through German ranks. America possessed incomprehensible abundance. Peiper's discovery wasn't just about fuel but industrial warfare's nature. Victory belonged to whoever produced the most petroleum, steel, aluminum. Germany never had a chance. The final irony: American forces cataloging abandoned German equipment at found 39 perfect tanks abandoned solely for lack of fuel. Major Robert Harrison's salvage report noted fuel required 8,000 gallons. Classification: minimal. Source: local reserve. Time 4 hours. What was impossible for Germans, 8,000 gallons to save their best tanks, was beneath American notice. A minor request using local reserves exceeding Gruber Peiper's peak strength. This was Peiper's discovery at not just that America had more fuel, but that American abundance operated on a scale making German scarcity irrelevant. The war was over when American industrial capacity mobilized revealed what had been true since 1942. Germany fought the impossible, measuring defeat in gallons while America measured victory in oceans. The Tiger tank sits in its museum. Fuel gauge empty, monument to when tactical excellence met logistical reality and lost. Visitors ask why such powerful tanks were abandoned. The answer: no fuel.